that's another key thing for us is that you don't have to have a data scientist at hand to write the right query, right? It's all in the UI, it's no code, right? It's all these other patterns in SaaS that we've seen recently is that you have to be able to self-serve and it has to be an easy to use tool for those outcomes.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, we have Dave Wisdom, who is the Global Head of Sales Engineering at Permeative, a privacy-forward audience platform that empowers publishers and advertisers to leverage first-party data for personalized and secure advertising. With extensive experience in sales engineering and ad tech, Dave is instrumental in driving the adoption of AI-driven solutions that enhance customer acquisition and data-driven decision-making in business, and that's why we're excited to have him on the show. Dave, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me. Really, really glad to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. I'm really excited to get into some of the stuff that you're doing here with Permeative, Dave. But before we get too far into it, could we start with maybe just a couple of minutes on your background? You know, who you are, where you came from, and how you ended up in the role as Global Head of Sales Engineering at Permeative.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to college, right? I started out pre-med. I realized that I didn't want to do med school, so I pivoted to information systems and specifically management information systems and databases. So for 20 plus years, been playing in the world of, data and its best use for business. Did DBA work, and then I transitioned to email marketing and data analytics for site side for measurement. Did my MBA in marketing, and then I basically transitioned over to the agency world. So I worked for a couple different Publicis agencies for Moxie, which was agency of record for Verizon. We launched the first mobile-enabled phone purchase experience, right? And we made sure that that kind of went live. I think that was probably around 2011, give or take. And a bunch of other site replatforms. What I learned pretty quickly, though, is that in the world of kind of media, advertising, marketing, like you needed a direct connection to customers, right? So I got recruited into Exact Target, which became Salesforce Marketing Cloud, where I was in kind of a business consultant overlay on the sales engineering function. Where I got to spend an amazing amount of time with some really experienced sellers and sales engineers, solutions consulting or Silicon as we called it then. Um, and then again, I transitioned into leading pre-sales at Appboy, which became Braze, the marketing automation and kind of data platform that, that has IPO'd back at the end of 21. And so it's been a great ride. Last 5 years or so, leading up to Permitive, I've been at Bloomreach, right, which is marketing automation, site personalization, and commerce search. So a lot of different other areas there, but all have been pretty much hyper growth at various phases of companies, and it's really centered around how do we have enable people to tell stories about how software can solve problems. AI has really just been kind of an accelerant to that process.
There's this really colorful background of all these little moments in history that you've had the, I don't know, privilege, I would say, to be a part of, which is so cool to be talking
Absolutely.
to you and know that you've seen this evolution of, we'll call it a more data focused or data centered initiative when it comes to marketing and business growth. And not that data wasn't always there. I remember some of my early experiences reaching out to newspapers or magazines or radio stations and asking, for details on who it is we'd be reaching and all that kind of thing. And it helped to some degree to make some decisions, but you were still kind of met with that caveat every time you tried to deploy something that, hey, there's no guarantee in this. All we can promise you is that we'll show people your message. And with the advent of the internet and social media and all these really advanced tools, I think we have now entered an age where there is more data than we know what to do with. And my assumption, Dave, is that you and your business are working to address that issue and make the data that is abundant more useful in our attempts to grow business. Is my assumption accurate? And if so, I'd love to get maybe an inside scoop on, well, what is important data to us and why is that something that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think to kind of talk to what's immediately a hand at Permitive is we're trying to create a way for publishers to reach audiences that are of high value to advertisers, right? Without kind of re-entering the what I'd call quagmire slash information security, privacy, compliance nightmare that was third-party cookies, right? Also, as
Mhm.
well as non-consented data insecure exchanges of information, often in clear text, right? Being bounced around in these cookies, right? Where anybody effectively connecting to you in a browser session could read it. And a lot of these companies still hold a lot of that data, right? And it's a diminishing asset, but it still has a high degree of value. It's being misused, right? And what Permitive is trying to do is saying we don't need to know your precise identity, right? Your intent, your behavioral patterns, right? Your similarity to other audiences can be directly introduced into the ad serving environment so that we can securely target. And as they say, every impression that you can attach more data to, right? Whether again it's behavioral, contextual, even collaborative with advertisers themselves, the more money you can charge for it, which makes for a more sustainable business for these for the publisher. But that can be said for literally any business anywhere. If you're trying to grow your business, right? If you're trying to reach your audience, um, the ability to connect data across these various systems, like you said, we're generating more data than ever, right? Just in terms of like clicks and opens and impressions and what content they consumed and did I get good demand gen here? Did they engage with my founder-led content here? Right? Did they engage with my white paper here? And so on and so forth. But the signals, for example, now are much easier to contact people directly. For example, retarget them on advertising, but also connect them up to CRM systems, to call it intent-based systems for like B2B targeting and things like that. I think the main challenge right now is that people haven't historically had a way to say, I need to have 1,000 conversations and I need each one to be different or distinct. And I think what in kind of the ad context, right, that's limited by the amount of creative. You've started seeing the emergence of AI solutions to create ad creative that is, hyper targeted. So they don't develop 10 assets and then make 15 different sizes. They're creating 1,000 assets and then they're automatically generating all the various iterations. The same thing goes for targeting. You might want to have 1,500 micro cohorts as opposed to, male, female, mortgage intender, homeowner, apartment renter. These can be very clear. For example, like apartment renter, hopeful homeowner, right? Opportunistic homeowner, loan intender, high credit, high asset. But all of these different things, as a result, are leading people to say, I need to have a system that's going to be optimized towards reaching these outcomes. And I need to do it with plain English, right? So when an advertiser sends us a brief, we're developing tools that are going to break down that brief and suggest cohorts or segments or suggest targeting logic, for example, that allows you to find that audience more quickly.
And okay, so there's a the necessity of more personalized content, I believe, comes from the consumer's engagement with the content. Like the person who is engaging with that content is going to decide whether or not this is something that they're going to find useful or not. Now, it used to be that we could create a blanket message and that would be good enough to reach the people. But what you're kind of indicating is that the more sophisticated this marketing engine becomes, the more specific we need to get um, in the marketing message, and that comes from the creative, the scripts, the images, the videos that we produce and put out there. And okay, now we're faced with this new emerging technology on these platforms. I'm going to use kind of Facebook or Meta as an example here. Is it used to be back in the early Russell Brunson days that you could target people based on, hey, if I have a betting program, well, I can target people who like to follow football and I can put
Yeah.
a football related message in front of them. And so that made sense to us as users and as users of the advertising platform is, hey, I'm a football guy. I like football, advertise football stuff to me, and I should engage, but they're taking those options away. They are slowly but surely pulling away. Hey, you can't actually use this to target, or and some of it is in the interest of diversity or inclusion or whatever, and some of it is just, hey, listen, the ads don't perform as well when you target the wrong people, and we don't have a lot of stickiness with our potential client base, so we need to address that with a more sophisticated tool. So now this emergence of more specific marketing material is necessary. So how does the work that you're doing kind of tie into that? Is it a part of that? Is it
Yeah.
the
It's
answer to it, or did you was this preemptive? You were already ahead of the
yeah.
curve with it.
No, I think what we're really focused on is the like one, they say the reach and the scale, right? The open internet, right, was originally 100% cookied, right? So you had every single person on the internet had a cookie, if not 150 cookies on their browser storage, right? So that Facebook or any of these other ad platforms could track you, profile you, and basically hand that, for example, football definition around so that when they saw you across the internet, they could target you. What's happened is most of the bidding and most of like the automated systems are now targeting. They think they have a cookie in, for example, in North America around 30% of the user base now still has a third party cookie, right? One, because most people have stopped dropping them, but also because clients are automatically, for example, auto reject third party cookies on Safari, right? Chrome said they were going to deprecate, or rather Google did. They reverse course, but the bottom line is that you need a system that can watch a customer, right, and see what they're doing and see kind of how they're interacting with your content, with your site, with your publication, and then it needs to be directly integrated to these ad serving systems. So you or maybe already have a great creative strategy, but you need to understand like what are the underlying characteristics of these folks who love football, right? Are they also long haul travelers? Do they like to go to games as destination as like vacation, right? Do they like to go to like, big premier matches, right? That's what a lot of our clients have found is that, when you have the certain characteristics of long haul traveler, right? That means you have disposable income. That means you have interest in food and wine usually. That means you have and so the creative strategy becomes really important, but that's not the part we solve. What we're trying to solve is the internet. I always call it the piranha pool problem, right? We've gone from a lake to these really small pools with a ton of competition. And what we've said is step out of that pool, step into a much wider group or audience because we have proprietary patented technology that allows you to target somebody on the device using what they call edge processing. So we can see who they are, see what they're doing without knowing their identity, without having to know an email address or a cookie or any of these other things. We do something called a permutive ID. And what that allows you to do then is, as we were talking about this morning, mint an ID and then start associating behaviors and patterns with it. And then advertisers can bring their data to us, right, in a collaborative way and say, this is what we know about, hashed email, de-wisdom, right, or whatever else, right? And when they can bring their historical subscriber data, maybe their historical purchases and so on, we can then hold that in a kind of a high trust way. And then when we send data to the ad server, we're sending groups of people that are going to have a high likelihood to take the actions of that campaign, of that like a line item saying, hey, this is a engagement based campaign. This is a brand campaign. This is a high intent, bottom of funnel, maybe a low, super targeted campaign. But we're trying to overcome the reachability and scale problem. That's our primary focus right now. Um, to go back to one earlier point, though, the data silos and data assets, there's been hundreds of databases stood up, right, by various companies, and they very rarely talk to one another. So we're also making a big bet on what we call composability, right? You already have a data asset that you have a small, medium, or even big company have built on Snowflake, on GCP, BigQuery, on AWS, right? We want to have a view into that data asset without having to copy it over and without having to consume it. We just want to view, see what patterns are or matches make sense, bring it over, and then make it activated in the ad server environment.
I see. Okay. So does this help then with attribution?
It does, yeah, because when we see those folks effectively live on the device, the browser, the app, right, we can see the actions they've taken, and then we can route that back into the same data store. That's what's really important is making this circular so that because when we talk about 20 years ago, when we were talking about site analytics, most of those systems were the definition, for example, in Omniture or Google Analytics is one definition, right? Google very intelligently then took Google Analytics, gave it away for free, and then took their view of the world and made it available to ad targeting, for example, right? Saying, hey, like let's target everybody who's middle of funnel. You've defined this funnel as somebody who's looking or shopping for, say, luggage, suitcases, right? That's a group that we can then syndicate to various ad serving platforms. But again, that relied on cookies, that relied on the old method of targeting. But that system would never talk to anybody else. What we're seeing now is people are replatforming onto very large implementations, again, of these data warehouses. They're targeting their logic, and then what we're doing is we're routing data back to them and saying, hey, these were the clickers, these were the people who viewed this impression of this particular ad or creative. And then when you then bring that into here's the first use of the buzzword AI, right? It can see patterns in that data and the way that clients interacted that will give you, like, for example, like saying, hey, this creative resonated with these main kind of defined cohorts or these groups, or there's a second or there's a ninth or 10th cohort that you haven't identified yet that we can give you some additional descriptive elements around, like they share the following characteristics or they look alike this other group that we already have.
This is really powerful. Somebody, I think his name is Chris Walker, just came across my radar, and because he's talking about this concept called the dark funnel. It's
Hmm.
when we set something up, we know, okay, on the top, we need some brand awareness level stuff. Let people know that we exist. We don't know if they're aware of the problem or the solution, but we just need to know that them to know that this is what they're dealing with. Okay. The people that engage with that to some degree, now we can kind of measure and we can track that and we can figure out that the people who are more engaged with that content are marketing qualified leads, let's say. So
Sure.
now we can market to them an actual sales message and drive them to take a specific action, whether it's to enter our sales system or book a discovery call, whatever that might be, or maybe to get something, a lead magnet or whatever. Now they're sales qualified leads. Now we can sell, 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 close deals, and everybody's happy. But we can't really track all of the different touch points because it could have been, hey, that one time I did a podcast with Dave about permeative, right? They heard us talking about the idea of the dark funnel and then they forgot about it for a couple of months and then they
Yep.
searched, hey, who said that again? They searched dark funnel, they find something else, it leads them back to us, and now they've engaged with us, but we've put a cookie tracker on our website and now we can
Yep.
remarket to them. And so where is the attribution? Where does it come from? And what I'm picking up on, Dave, is that given that it was multiple touch points
Yep.
and you have this involvement of the AI, you can now look for all of those touch points and find really clear common patterns that happen from those activities. Is that a true assumption?
Or the user's data, right? It's providing on their device and it's not being shared anywhere else, right? And so one of the key things that we do is we'll store that they viewed three more articles about attribution or click paths or CRM synchrony and things like that. One of the main challenges is, like you said, they may dabble in the top of funnel, right, as an unauthenticated user. Most of the ad targeting systems and kind of secondary targeting systems are relying on authenticated users. There's no scale in that, right? There might be a 3 to 5% match rate, right, between your database of users and your web traffic, right? And you've started to see the emergence of certain technologies that are guaranteeing a little bit more visibility into kind of who's in that funnel and maybe like doing some thumbprinting.
Hmm.
We think that is potentially just taking advantage of regulatory gaps in the US market, for example, or even various other markets. What we'd much rather see is these are the people that we know took the following steps to convert. And then what we want to start doing is modeling their behaviors, like you said, look-alike, where this is a group that looks like me, and this is a cohort that's active that we're seeing live devices, live sessions on again app or browser. And then you can say is, all right, I'm also going to upload everybody who converted, who has a subscriber, who became a premium subscriber, whatever product, and or maybe they bought an entry level product and then they graduated to upper tier products and things like that. And so then that allows us to use modeling, right? Basically, which modeling just best way of describing it is, using math to determine how likely someone is to be similar to another person, right? Based on their behavioral patterns, their underlying characteristics. AI is, for example, very kind of nascent in this area, but machine learning is, decades old, right? And what it can say is, I see I see A here, I see A here. It also tends to correlate with B and C, right? That's grouping them together. Whereas classification is saying this person is a football fan. This person is, we have an 80% likelihood that this person is a football fan and traveler, right? And is somebody who's going to do in these things and or who's going to convert to, your premium product or your a subscription for your product. And finding the patterns in the data and then also having a means or a mechanism by which to reach them, right? Um, Also means that, for example, the SDK that runs on the device, right? It's not just for ad targeting. We can also push that into social, right? We can push that into Facebook, TikTok, right? We can even append that as a flag in your CRM. So if we see this individual and we kind of have a clarity on, an integration to their email address, for example, we can flag them as a football traveler intender or as a subscription intender. And that's something that we see the kind of the blurring the lines between CDP, customer data platform, and then data management platform, which we feel like is kind of falling away.
Hmm.
What people are really looking for is customer data activation platform, which is really what we're calling ourselves in market.
So it's just a natural evolution of the way that data and our interaction with data has kind of evolved, and now we are making it a lot more sophisticated with the addition of maybe artificial intelligence, but machine learning. The fact that you can teach this stuff or the tool or whatever what you're looking for
And
with.
how comfortable you are. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
saying, hey, I'm good with 70% match, right? It's still way
Right.
better.
Right. Right.
And then AI is really around saying, hey, I got a question from a client. How many football lovers do you have in your audience database? Right. And we could say, if it's based on like flag of yes, no, right? We could say, oh, I have 30,000, right? But if we can say football intenders for us tend to be, for example, they tend to skew maybe 60-40 male, right? They tend to skew towards, suburban versus urban, right? Or maybe they send like in certain markets, they're heavily urban, right? They're within 10 or 15 miles or kilometers of their stadium, right? And so on and so forth. So, but if you have a bigger picture of who somebody is, you can say, all right, what you call a football super fan, right? We call a collection of these various attributes, right? And we can say with a high degree of certainty that those things are correlated so that when you enter that query, you can say football intenders or football superfans or football travelers share these characteristics. And we have 180,000 people. When you have I wouldn't even call it looser. I just call it a more, call it multifaceted view of that group or that audience versus saying
Right.
somebody has checked the box, has, as we call it, deterministically said, or what's the word, declared that they are a football fan. We can infer that they are and have a much higher likelihood to reach them without them having to, raise their hand and say they are.
This is really powerful. I can see there's a number of different businesses or industries that could really benefit from leveraging technology like this. Who are you after, Dave? What is the kind of perfect avatar of a client or customer that could really
Yes.
leverage this to the maximum of its capability?
I mean, right now we already serve about 150 of the world's premier kind of tier one publishers, right? So we serve a lot of the folks, the Hearsts, the Condé Nasts, right? BBC, and a variety of other, household names that they themselves own hundreds of properties, publications. What we're seeing is that we want to also kind of continue to reach the tier ones, but we want to take the tools of, teams of 20 or 30 people and democratize access to these tools, right? We want to say that if you're what we call vertical publisher or highly specific, like a weather app or a weather service, or again a sports publication, right? That may be heavily focused on this, or event. Planning, or maybe you're planning a wedding and you go to a wedding planning site, right? There's specific advertisers that want to be part of that conversation. So what we're trying to do is work with publishers that are looking beyond just the traditional methods of subscription, right? But we also want to give them relationships with their advertisers, right? There's this period, last period of time where a lot of the programmatic ecosystems are being kind of either legislated or kind of moved into just much more difficult to operate at like a significantly higher return. Like, yeah, you're paying $1.50 for every 1,000 impressions you have on your site. If you do that as a direct deal, it can be 5, 7, 10, $12. So any company that wants to better monetize, have what I call it, specialized data products. Like a lot of our publishers have branded data products, right? Where they go out to market and say, this is, publisher X advantage, right? And we have 150 well-defined audiences. They're frequent readers, right? They have high correlations with the type of things that you're targeting. Um, what we're really trying to say overall is that if you are a company that creates content, we want to keep you in business, right? We want you to not be, and I think I heard this from one of our prospects. We don't want to be consumed by AI, right?
Mm.
We want to have a differentiated advantage of kind of the human wisdom of, say, a reporter or a journalist or somebody else that knows really a lot about a certain area, or, for example, a content or a writer that knows a lot about, food and wine, meals, things like that. We don't want just the gray goo that come out of the AI system. What we want is human beings to have a real strong point of view that you resonate with. And then it feels less transactional when you're shown an ad, right? The ad in that context is a continuance of the relationship. And by giving highly targeted advertising from advertisers that gel well with your intended audiences, without compromising security, privacy, or relying on an antiquated, cookie-based targeting, for example, you can go to market, reach a lot more people with that audience without having to spend money on other people's definition. That's what they call third-party data marketplaces.
Really powerful. So for your go-to-market strategy, there's a lot of outreach, a lot of handshakes, a lot of networking, probably events and stuff like that. Are you leveraging your own tools and technologies to help you kind of target your own thing, or do you find that in your space it's a little bit more necessary to go on that personal route instead?
Yeah, I mean, so we do a lot on the personal route. I mean, I think our technology is really for like internet scale, right? I
Okay.
think that
Yeah.
there are tools that are fit for purpose, right? Like we use, Gong, we use Salesforce, we use, Sales Loft and various other kind of sales automation tools. So I think there's best in breed for those. I also think that I think one of the things that when we were briefing for this conversation was what tools are you using right now? And I think a huge tool I'm using right now is, for example, if we're about to go talk to a publisher and I want to know their risk factors. I want to know what's going on in their business. I can now upload that into ChatGPT or Gemini, right? I can
Mm,
say, give me the top 10 risk factors that you see and even compare them side by side. ChatGPT said this, Gemini said this, right? And then also upload last year's report. I say, hey, what disappeared from their risk factors? Like maybe it's COVID, inflation, instability in this market or something like that,
mhm.
right? And maybe what's cropped up now is, uncertainty around regulatory environments or interest rates or whatever else. And so when you can go to a customer and say, "Hey, CRO, CEO, we read the report, and but now instead of spending 4 hours, right, I said with a big cup of coffee reading through it line by line, you can get a net out of it in about a minute and a half, right? And then you can say, if I were to generate an email to prospect this person and then the three levels below them, what would the three emails be? And then you just describe, I want a managing director, I want a manager, and I want a frontline operational person. You can say tailor these risks and what it means for you, and then also look at maybe 100 other emails I've sent, right, or the transcripts of 100 other calls I've had and other pitches. That was simply not available until 4 or 5 years ago, right, with the advent of things like Gong and various other tools where you could have recommended next actions, recommended emails, right? The path through to whom else you should speak to. Also, what were the warning words, right? These models, these smaller models have been trained around, for example, negative signals. Like it's like having a really experienced salesperson kind of sitting over your shoulder saying, "Hey, by the way, when they said that word, it didn't mean they didn't say no, but that was the equivalent of slamming a door in your face, right? Especially in the era of Zoom, where you can't
Right.
watch 16 faces at once. But these tools can. They can watch and listen to the words they're saying and say, hey, by the way, when these words were used in the previous 50 calls you recorded, it correlated with an account going dead or a pursuit going dormant is probably a nicer way of saying it.
Mm. Well, and then from there, I imagine there's probably some sort of actionable insight that you can derive from that. Like, okay, if in all of these conversations I've had, when I say XYZ, we get one, two, three as an outcome, and that's not a good one. What if
Mm.
we were to come and change XYZ to ABC? That now we have a better output on the other side. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think that when you see for example, a call or a pursuit, or again, in this case, a sales context, when you see a deal move faster, right, it's good for forensics and saying like, what questions did they ask, right? And then when we answer them, and there was like an excitement, or there was, oh, that's really cool, or those watchwords of, oh, that's exactly what we need. There's phrases that you can actually just program in to watch for those, right? You can also use this for enablement, saying, hey, by the way, you need to cover the fact that we don't use cookies. You need to cover the fact that we don't use identity. You need to cover the fact that we reach 100% of your audience without any of those technologies, right? And right, we're a native part of the ad tech ecosystem, for example. So if you don't cover those things, right, the pitch is incomplete. And then the things that you're saying, and now we're pushing additional functionalities into the market, right, where we're saying we now can absorb data from these different places, add the context that you need without, providing any additional opportunity for leakage, for example. So being able to layer in new messaging and kind of amplify and say, hey, by the way, sales staff, right? These are the messages that are resonating. These are the patterns we're seeing in the that the AI has raised as really important things. And also here's some additional coaching around and positioning decks, slides, 5 minute vignette recordings. That's what I'm doing with my team of sales engineers, is saying, um, describe it as customer pain. I like to say my old CRO, Scott, said, customers do not buy vitamins, they buy painkillers, right? And so we have to be saying there's pain and there's a painkiller. And if it's not a one for one match, customers won't buy. They won't move them off of their current position. Status quo is too powerful.
Right, that's actually a really powerful sales principle that I just recently learned in the last couple of months was doesn't have to just work, it has to work in the way that they want it to work, like the person who's buying
Precisely.
it. So having that it just sounds like better data, better analytics, better actionable insights, and that obviously will lend to a higher conversion rate or a better success rate in closing deals with
Yeah. And
the
as
advertisers.
centralized as possible, right? Fewer
Yeah.
places to go to, less, for example, room for just subjectivity, so that you know what's working and what's not. I also think that it's really important to say, hey, by the way, when we look at these results for our publishers, right, they reach significantly more people. They garner every single penny counts, right, in the publishing business,
Mm.
right? And when you're talking about, 3 or 4x audience increases in size, right? But not only just increases in size, it's higher quality and better segmentation as well. So being able to put that in their hands and give these people that are answering these briefs and requests a day over day, without having to. That's another key thing for us is that you don't have to have a data scientist at hand to write the right query, right? It's all in the UI, it's no code, right? It's all these other patterns in SaaS that we've seen recently is that you have to be able to self-serve and it has to be an easy to use tool for those outcomes.
Really powerful. Dave, this has been awesome, very insightful. There's a ton of value that I got from this conversation. I'm wondering if, as we wrap things up here, we could look a little bit towards the future at maybe some of the big goals you're aiming
Hey.
at, maybe key revenue milestones or other metrics that you're using to measure that. What does success look like for you on the horizon?
Yeah, I think we're in a bit of a doldrum in SaaS and software in general. If there are certain companies that are growing really fast, certain companies, but I would say that every earnings report for publicly traded companies is that you need 3 or 4x on your pipeline, right, to achieve your goals, right? I think Salesforce came out that it used to be 3, now it's 4 or 5, depending on their product line. So all things old or new again, you have to be on the phones, you have to be picking up, and you have to be building the pipeline again. There's a ton of benefits to physical presence at the events, right? But I think it's also so that's the human side of just picking up the phone, being there. But also you have to enable the buyer, right? So you have to give them um, literally pre-digested or kind of pre-recorded answers to the most common pains that your problem, service, agency, capability, even you as an individual solve. Maybe you're a coach or maybe you're, somebody else like that and say, by the way, common problem, here's how I solve it. Here's the impact it made to 3 or 4 companies that we've worked with, right? So it used to be about 50% of the buying cycle would occur, right, in kind of with the salesperson alongside you, right? That was and it used to be 80 right back in the 50s when it was somebody selling you a huge mainframe computer, right, for this particular thing, right? Now they're saying that it's actually flipped. So about 80% or 90% of the sales cycle is occurring on the open web, on the internet. They're browsing your content. They're looking at your white papers. Like you have to have really robust tracking. You have to have really robust, as we talked about, kind of understanding of your funnel. But then you also have to say, all right, we're seeing a big spike in this interest in this content, push content out. Push videos out, push brief vignettes, and making sure that perfection is not the enemy of the good, right? And to say, hey, we pushed good content out to cover this question that we saw emerge on Tuesday. By Thursday, we had recorded a 3 to 5 minute video. That's another area where AI can really help you. Here's the scripts of the last 100 videos that I recorded, or conversations that I had. That's my speaking style. Write me another script, cover these 3 pain points and these 3 solutions. And I found that's really helpful for turning around really highly sophisticated content. Even if you were then turning around and emailing it, right? It still feels very personal, right? It's still in your voice. It's not going to sound different all of a sudden. So I think that using AI and those kind of tools to reach to get people off of status quo, right? That's the number one challenge I'm hearing from my various colleagues in the space is that no decision and or maintenance of the status quo is a very common sales outcome across the industry right now. And the only way you overcome that is to just make it really stark as to what continuing on the path they're on will result in.
Yeah, that clarity in the messaging is really important, especially when there is way too much content for people to digest.
Mhm.
It's the content that took the time in preparation of and being in service of that solution that's going to help kind of tip their scales, I think, in that decision
And
making part, which is why it's so important for us to have conversations like this, Dave, to be able to um, organically suss out what is important, what do we need to be doing, what is everybody up to, and that part of it is like, oh, okay, now there's value to be had. Now we can actually do something with the information, and that'll lead you closer to making a buying decision. Because hey, after hearing Dave talk to Devin about um, this tool that Permutive has created, uh, we need to talk to Dave. We need to get that done, right? And now you have somebody taking action, which is really powerful.
absolutely.
Dave, this has been wonderful. I think if I could maybe in closing, what sort of advice might you offer somebody who's kind of out there up to it, trying to figure something out like this, and just doesn't really know which direction to take?
I think this is something I learned if you find me on LinkedIn, I launched this thing in January called Learning Out Loud. I don't know if you saw that on LinkedIn, but it was a series of 10 videos where I basically broke down how AI actually works, right? Like what a transformer is, what an LLM stands for. What's really amazing about these tools is you can say, give me a 2-day learning plan. I have 2 hours a day, right, for the next 2 weeks or two months or whatever. Give me a learning plan for every topic I should cover on understanding LLMs, right? And then it'll say, and then include links to these references or include links to my sources. So literally asking LLMs to tell you the most common way that people should learn Spanish. Get ready for a marathon, right? Learn cursive, learn calligraphy, learn flower arranging. Those tools can give you day by day, hour by hour. Hey, I'd spend 2 hours on this, 2 hours on this, 2 hours on this, right? If you finish this early, here's the next topic. So having it actually give you a crafted learning plan and then basically bouncing that up against, right, kind of various other things. I always say YouTube is, there's somebody else on YouTube that's talked about something that's at least adjacent to what you're doing. One other tool I really like, for example, is Perplexity, right? So it has that AI LLM component, but it gives you direct sources. So you're not also just, again, worrying about gray goo. It'll say CNN said this about the emergent models, right? The Economist talked about this, right? And so on and so forth. So they'll actually reference scientific papers, white papers, popular press, and so on. So make sure you develop a learning plan that's grounded in reality. But I think making sure that you have an action bias, these tools really enable you to have that action bias. It gives you the next action, right? And you have to interrogate it as a human being as to what you think is the best way for you to learn. But that's again another element you can put in. You can say, "Hey, I'm a visual learner, right? I do best with videos. Like for me, I listen to podcasts at 2.x, right? So if I was playing this back, I'd be speaking even faster than I already am, which is hard to believe. But or I bet I learn best by doing. I learn best by writing. I learn best by crafting, right? You can give that instruction to the engine, and these engines are now being able to, break down entire systems. One thing also I've been doing as well is if you want to gain knowledge about a topic, um, is that I've actually uploaded whole episodes of podcasts, right? Say they're 3-hour podcasts. I don't have time. I have twin 7-year-olds, right? I have a limited amount of time in the evening after dinner and bedtime. But I say net out this podcast for me in terms of things that would be relevant for me based on what I've told you about what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. So don't be afraid of big information, right? Or big data. Like use AI as a tool to help break it down.
Really sound advice. Dave, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
My DMs are open on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm under D Wisdom on Twitter, and but LinkedIn is the fastest way to reach me. I'm always here to help. I do coaching, I do advisory, just with folks. I'm always happy to help, especially somebody who's entering this world that we're in and they're trying to break in from non-traditional fields. Like I've worked with ex-history teachers, I've worked with, students that have taken a new master's course, whatever else it is. So I'm always happy to help. Life is long, careers are just about as long, and so I'm always here to help, and always here to have a conversation. But yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to reach me.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to that in the show notes so that anybody watching or listening will be able to find you easily. On that note, if you want to get in touch with me and my team for any of your AI or marketing needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this conversation. Thanks for joining us for this episode, and I will see you in the next.